All right, everything you need to know about the universes you love. Oh, weird one. A weird one to start this off. David, did you see this? Did you hear about this? Did you see this news? The Beyond the Spider-Verse drama that came out on the Twitter sphere. Just a
I
quick
did.
timeline breakdown. September 9th, reports came flying from all the Twitter accounts that we know and trust forever, right? That reported that most of Beyond the Spider-Verse had been scrapped due to creative differences. And there was fear that it wouldn't come out before 2027, which is almost
Yeah.
a year later than the expected date. And that was crazy. That was a crazy thing to hear from the third film in one of, if not the most revered comic book movie franchises we've ever had. And for most of it to be scrapped due to creative differences, what in the Sam Raimi's going on? You know what I mean? Um, and
Dang.
that was September 9th. September 10th, the composer comes out and says, nah, there's no way any of that's true. Y'all being lied to. And then we're like, okay, combating, what's gonna happen? And then bang, Chris Miller himself. Nothing has been scrapped. Things are moving forward swimmingly. David Thompson, as a journalist, somebody who professionally writes about this stuff, how does this happen? How does something so specific make the rounds for it to just be not true in the slightest?
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it seemed kind of weird saying that creatively they were scrapping the story and that's the cause of the delay. And obviously there is a big delay for Beyond the Spider-Verse. I'm sure you fans know that. I mean, it was supposed to initially release March 2024, which is well far and
Nope.
past gone, right? And that always seemed very unrealistic, I mean, Across the Spider-Verse comes out 5 years after Into the Spider-Verse, and that seemed like a pretty healthy distance to me, right? 5 years. These are very difficult movies to animate, it seems like. And initially, from my perspective, way back, it seemed like they were going to be kind of crossing over across and beyond and doing a lot of maybe like the work for beyond, during the across kind of production and moment. I don't know what's going on. It would be surprising knowing this team, Chris Miller, knowing this team, at least like, from the outside looking in and knowing this story, that they would need to scrap it creatively, that they would need to change the plot line. Now, speaking, the journalist thing, big box office guy, I think this movie does not release until 2027. But the reason I don't think it's gonna happen next year. I think they would have already slated it by then. Right now, it's just an indefinite delay, just for the official status of the film. That is the official status right now. I think it is not going to be 2025. It is not going to be 2026. I think Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland will release during that year. They're not going to want to release the same characters movie in the same year, if that makes sense, right? Break it up a little bit. That's what Sony's going to do. So I do think that it will release in 2027. And they didn't deny that part. I think that currently is the plan for maybe like a spring release or a summer release of 2027. And that's fine with me, right? 5 year gap between the first two, 4 year gap between the second two. I'm totally cool with that. I don't think it's a creative thing. I think it's a production thing, an animator thing, and just a strategic thing, right? Because at the end of the day, maybe they could release it in 2026, but they won't spread out Spidey and give it to us in 2027.
And it's just one of those things where like we just need to train ourselves to know that we can't just blindly believe anything that doesn't come from a rag that we know and trust, right? And
Yeah.
it's movies or sports all over again. Every offseason in the NFL, you hear all these crazy rumors and all these absolutely wild thoughts and opinions as to why this player hasn't signed to this place and why this owner hates this guy. And you hear all these things. And then as soon as you hear a coach, player, or GM or owner usually tweet, hey, none of this is true. That's it. That's the letter of the law, from the horse's mouth kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's the same here. And what is really interesting to me about the Spider-Verse movies is everybody's so obviously we're excited to see the next one. It's an absolute bummer that we have to wait so long, especially after such a cliffhanger
Cliffhanger.
of a
Yeah.
second movie. The first one had a post-credit scene. It did not have a cliffhanger. You know what I mean? Like the first one did not have us all leaning forward as the screen went black. Um, these things are all post-production. It's all animated. And these designers, these artists, these motion artists specifically have so much work to do to make it perfect. And, should it take 4 years to make a movie? On average, probably not. But you look at these Spider-Verse movies, everybody go turn on a Spider-Verse movie right now and pause any random screen. I
Right.
promise you it could be the wallpaper of your computer if you wanted it to be. Every single frame in each of these movies is a comic panel, and that's how they make them. It takes a long time, but man, has it paid off? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Who's rushing these people at this point? It's insane to think about.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for the next one. I think that is this going to go down as one of the greatest comic book movie trilogies of all time? It's hard to say it's not already a favorite to do that.
I was gonna say it's on pace too. I mean, there are some people out there just because it's animated won't really like count it, but
Which is a barrier.
yeah, and I understand that pretty well. Even though I love the animation for the the Spider-Verse movies, it's a different level because the animation in those films to me is what makes them so special. It's not like something that takes away from it or is like a crutch in any way. I will say though, just on this topic in terms of just like trying to litigate what's real and what's not. One thing I love about what James Gunn's doing over at DC right now is he hops on threads a lot and, just and says it like it is. You said the horse's mouth. It is so refreshing in a sense just to see James Gunn spout off stuff, in replies on threads or Twitter or whatever. I think typically threads, just, debunking things all the time or confirming things all the time. I mean, I was stunned by this. He just said in a reply on an Instagram post how Superman's symbol in the new movie is the Kingdom Come logo. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, what does that mean? Like, we all kind of knew that, but then it's like he actually says it like that. And I don't know. I just love it. It's so refreshing. And it is so much better to hear it from the horse's mouth, specifically, hear it from, one of the trades in many ways. And then also just get this information because the rumor stuff these days is just crazy. I mean, there's so many, and you know them. Like, if you listen to this podcast, you probably know the Twitter handles or just the different people you hear about and read online coming up with stuff. Really, it feels like where it's like I could probably make an anonymous Twitter account and like kind of start pointing you in the right direction because something seemed kind of obvious too. And back to our story, creative differences. That's such a generic, vague thing that you could probably just like. Yeah, my source said that. It seems that way. Let me just toss that in, right? And I love how it was debunked. I love the era of getting something while it's ahead. Nipping it in the bud. I think it's a really positive thing that we should all support.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a crazy world we live in, kind of thing. I just can't wait. This is a movie I'll be perpetually excited for. Take as much time as you need. Moving over to another Spider-Man movie I'm not excited for the slightest. Venom 3, The Last Dance. The Other Last Dance, as many people are calling it. The Venom 3 Last Dance had one of those trailers, David. Just one of those trailers where they just couldn't help themselves, could they? They couldn't help it. They had to do it. They showed the other antagonists, we assume the big bad of the Venom trilogy, Knull. Who comic book readers, Spider-Man fans will know very intrinsically by name. Knull, quick debrief. It's not a complex origin story. It's pretty straightforward, but it's one of those characters like, their fastball's great. They don't need some crazy complex Sylvie style origin story. They're just really great at what they do. He's the creator of all symbiotes.
Yep.
He was cast aside by the Celestials. He created the Necro Sword that we saw from Love and Thunder. And that's the nerdiest thing you'll hear us say all day. But Knull was seen in the Venom trailer. David, I want to hear your reactions on Knull, but also just giving away everything in the trailer. It's classic Sony. They've been doing it for years at this point. People are pretty upset about it because it's not like they showed him in any sort of epic kind of way, but this could have been a pop for big Venom fans showing up in the theaters.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because what is this character's role going to be in this movie? And now speaking of the rumors we were just discussing, rumors are swirling in the sense of like, could he appear in a Spider-Man movie? Could he appear in a future movie? That's the rumor right now, is that he is going to Knull. This will not be a one and done for him. But what does that look like? And do we want that? Do we care? And that's what's the issue with Sony is like, they can use all these great characters, use all these great ideas, and then just butcher them over and over and use them to like their least potential. Like there are so many projects and characters in the MCU, and I hate to always do this, but it's so true. Characters, ideas that they get the most out of them, right? They make them better than what they even were in the comic books, you know? And that's always so many, that's always so many fans' complaints, especially comic book readers, where it's like, it wasn't quite as well done as it was in the comic books. And in the
Right.
MCU, so many instances they get it right and they do it even better. And they they expound upon whatever the original idea was. In this case, it's the total opposite. Everything that the Sony verse does, they try to take these really cool ideas and characters that fans really care about, and they use them in the most generic, bland, terrible ways over and over and over again. And like the Venom movies specifically, they work because there's a comedic element to them. People like Tom Hardy, and there's just some fun to be had. And like the CGI of it all, the action, people like are drawn to it. I mean, and it's hard to deny. The box office speaks for itself. That's why I love the box office, because it shows the audience genuine interest in spending money and going out to the theater. On Knull, I don't know, man. First off, this trailer was touted as the final trailer. The film
Yeah.
doesn't release for a month and a half. Why is it the final trailer? Like they're acting as if it's releasing when Joker comes out in a couple of weeks. It's not. And it's like,
They can't
is it
help themselves.
really the final trailer? Right? Like,
Great.
is this actually it? Is it gonna be the final trailer? Like the last dance? I don't know.
It's so funny.
Gut reaction though, and gut feeling, just like the trailer, it was a tease. I think the character is going to be a tease in the movie too. I do not think he's going to be like the big bad and the main focal point.
Yeah.
And I do think, because not that I want this to happen, I do think he'll be set up for a future installment, a future adventure, Spider-Man movie or beyond, whatever it is. I do think there will be a there is almost certainly going to be a post-credit scene in this movie that sets something up in the future, whether it be in the Spider-Man verse or in the MCU as it relates to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, whether we like it or not, because that's the track record, right? Venom 2 showed us that to No Way Home. That is the track record. That's what we're working with now, forcing connections between these things. And I think that's what we're going to get.
Yeah, it's a scary thing. Absolutely it is. But it is though, man, because like those movies are so consistently bad at what we love about the other ones. Like it's not even like they could be two completely different things. They could if they wanted to be, but they try so hard to be the MCU and just are so bad at it. Like that's the thing. It's not.
Yeah.
It's if this was like any other kind of comics, like the X-Men movies, they weren't trying to be the MCU. They just
No.
happened to fall into that. But it's we'll see. This is going to be a movie. Speaking of another movie, I just wanted to bring this up real quick. Box office, big brain guy, friend. Weird way to say that. Speak No Evil in a fucking swell James McAvoy. Just big James like
Looks
huge.
great.
He could be Wolverine. I think big guy.
New
big
X-Men.
guy. Jimmy McAvoy. Speak No Evil, obviously legendary horror flick. Would you call it a horror flick or just a scary movie?
I think it's a horror flick. Yeah. Thriller.
Horror flick. Speak No Evil. James McAvoy. The trailers have been everywhere. Opened at 11.5 million. The budget of 15 million. It's gonna make its money back in the second week. That's huge, especially for that genre, especially for kind of where we're at in movies right now. David, box office wise, I feel like we've been on a run. Win after win after win for every type of movie that we've seen come out. That's got to be exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. And I think this year, in many ways, you look back at the overall box office, it'll definitely be up from 2023. And the crazy thing is, guys, talked about earlier, like 2025, man, it is going to be massive. All those movies got moved back because of the strikes. They're coming out. It's kind of similar to COVID, but in a better way, where in COVID, there were still concerns of audiences. I don't think that'll be the case in 2025. And in this case, yeah, I think definitely a win. It will make its money back. I will say, though, to counter a little bit, it is a little under projection. Some of Blumhouse's stuff this year actually hasn't done as well as they thought they would. And that's kind of interesting to me. Like this year, just like any other, there's been so many wins, so many losses, a lot of wins lately. Like we got, I think the biggest thing that happened this year with the box office was Disney released the two biggest summer hits, and they actually were massive gargantuan successes, right? Like it proved once
Mhm.
again, this can still happen, Inside Out 2, highest grossing animated movie ever. Unbelievable, right? Highest R-rated movie ever is now Deadpool and Wolverine. And you look at a movie called Speaking of Evil, and you see what it does, smaller budget. Look at Beetlejuice right now. It had a big budget. It's doing awesome. Beetlejuice killed it. Like Speaking of Evil did not open to number one. 11.5 is a pretty middling, I would say, opening weekend, but small budget. You're really paying for the James McAvoy of it all. And this
Sure.
is a movie that's I think it was a Danish film from a couple of years ago, and now it's like a,
Yeah.
a Hollywood remake, and there was some kind of backlash with that, but it wasn't an expensive Hollywood remake. And Jason Blumhouse, or Jason Blum, of Blumhouse, he's able to create and produce and distribute mainly all of these horror. I mean, horror movies have always slashers, like all these low budget horror flicks, thriller flicks. They've been what's really survived the most since COVID, and that this is just another example of that where, we'll see how far it gets. I think it's releasing in a good slot though, even though it didn't open incredibly well. I do think it will have some legs here, especially heading into even more of kind of like thriller, scary, spooky, all that stuff will help it. And I think in general, it's getting pretty good word of mouth. I haven't seen it personally. Thought about seeing it. Didn't go check it out yet. But definitely might. And I think there is a lot of interest there. And I think James McAvoy is still one of those big faces. It's definitely had a lot of marketing, I will say. I feel like there's been a lot of marketing push for this
So
one.
much.
Yeah, I saw James McAvoy at Comic-Con. There's a huge presence there for Speak No Evil. So yeah, looking forward, I will say, that it's funny you're talking about a run here, and we don't have to go on a tangent on this, but the Joker 2 numbers are only trickling down right now, which is kind of shitty to see. As a fan of the franchise, and then also just like box office wise, like, we'll see. So that's gonna be a really exciting box office moment, I guess, for the podcast and just discussion when that comes out, because right now it is trending down, where it's like, will it suddenly surge up? Will it hit, what the first one did? We'll see, man. But that's going to be a very interesting kind of moment in this year where I think for Warner Brothers, especially DC, Warner Brothers, very much so expected to be another monster hit like the first one was.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see those numbers, but also just what caused those numbers. You know what I mean? Because like obviously we talked about it last week. The reviews aren't awesome.
Yeah.
The Rotten Tomatoes score came lower than people expected. And also like concept wise, from day one, a musical, really?
Right.
So those are the kind of factors I'm looking into in box office. Like because like the Fall Guy was not great. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, not great. Like there was a point earlier this summer where we were like, man, the box office really is in trouble. I feel like ever since Inside Out 2, it's been just hit after
Yeah.
hit after hit.
Furiosa was right before
And
that. That was concerning.
yeah, another real
May in
disappointment
general was kind
monetarily.
of, yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm wondering. Is this a time thing? Is this something where when you release movies is going to shift? Like there's so many different factors. I'd love to just do a podcast breaking, like almost like ranking what are the biggest factors into a box office situation. Obviously, like
Speaking my
obviously,
language,
and
Matt.
everybody's got the movie's got to be good. No shit.
Not true though.
Like if,
Not always true.
hey, well, check out Venom. But I think that the layman would say, well, good movies make a lot of money. That's not true. So what are those other things? Like what are those like secondary factors, I guess you could say? Does having the Marvel Studios logo do what it did, 3-4 years ago? No. But what are the other factors? And I just think it's so interesting that a movie like Speak No Evil could perform so well against budget in a year where earlier Furiosa couldn't make a penny.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
It is interesting, man, and we will see going forward. Like, there's gonna be a lot of conversation, especially like I said around Joker, and then this November gauntlet around Thanksgiving. We have another Barbenheimer, really. Wicked, Gladiator 2, same date. 5 days later, Moana 2. Who's the loser out of that? There's gonna be 2 winners.
Yeah.
There's gonna be 1 loser. Which one is it? We'll find out.
We're gonna find out. Somebody who's very familiar with the box office, a box office legend, an acting legend, the voice of a generation, and I don't say that lightly. We lost a good one, especially here in the universes you love. You know, it was a great life, a long, incredible, legendary life for one James Earl Jones, the greatest voice that has ever graced the silver screen. For those who don't know, James Earl Jones, Darth Vader, Mufasa, and that's just his voice acting roles. You know, he's had a legendary acting career, Field of Dreams, Sandlot, Coming to America, Hunt for Red October, for God's sake. You know, just hit after hit after hit. An icon, not just in the acting world, but you know, an activist, somebody who was out there being himself more than so many other actors of his time. Uh, David James Earl Jones. I mean, fuck, he's Darth Vader. You know, it's one of the biggest movie stars of all time, and most of that is just because of what he was able to say into a microphone for so many years and for so many different roles.
Yeah.
When you think of James Earl Jones, where does your head go?
I mean, obviously Vader's iconic voice, Mufasa's iconic voice. I mean, these are his voice in many ways is the voice of my childhood as someone who loved Star Wars and someone who absolutely loved Lion King. I remember when he was one of the only. Here's what tells you all you need to know about James Earl Jones and his voice and his ability and the mark he left on us. He had to come back for the Lion King remake. No one else could voice Mufasa. There was no correction. There was no change. There was no reboot, recast for Mufasa. It's like we have to have James Earl Jones voice this character in this movie, and that's as simple as that. Everyone else can get swapped out, right? Every other character ever their voice can get swapped out, but he can't, man. And it's just incredible. Like so gifted, so talented. And by the way, I mean, it's really a crazy story. I don't know if you guys, listeners, if you know this, but before he passed, this was a news probably like a year ago, I want to say, he signed a deal with an AI company where his voice in, some ways will quote unquote live on, right? Where like
Perpetuity.
he signed off the rights for I assume, for his family, for them to keep using his voice in that ways. And that's an interesting moral conundrum question. I mean, he signed off on it. He wanted it to happen. Um, Once again, goes to show how special, right? How immortalizing and how just incredible he was, how talented he was. He'll be totally missed, and he will forever live on, in those moments and in this fandom, right, that we're a part of. Like, some other, I think some general audience members, just maybe just casual moviegoers may not really even know right now. Maybe just found out because of the passing that Mufasa and Darth Vader are the same voice, and not
Yeah,
everyone knew that. And like,
that's fun.
that really is a crazy thing, and I remember learning that. I didn't know it when I was a dumb kid watching these movies growing up. And I remember learning it when I, got older and started diving into this stuff and reading about movies and, all the stuff that we do now, which is cool. And I was like, holy crap, it's the same guy. And then it all made sense. Everything clicked in my head. Truly iconic. And by the way, one little James Earl Jones story when he came back for Rogue One specifically. I don't know. I remember seeing the news of that coming out before the movie, and like I want to do like a backflip. I was so excited because it's one of those things you can't change it. You can't replace it. It's perfect just the way it is. And yeah, it's just incredible. And it's good on him, man. He was 93 when he passed just now, in the last few days, working pretty much all the way up until his passing. And that is awesome, man. He seemed to
Yeah.
live life to the fullest, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I feel like it's one of those facts that everybody learns. You know, at some point, like, Darth Vader and Mufasa the same voice. Like that's like
Yeah.
a keystone fact everybody learns at some point.
Right.
Um, Aaron and I, we finally got that damn couch delivered to the new place in our TV room set up. And the first movie we watched because of this news was Lion King, and it hits so much harder than I ever could have imagined, man. Knowing that this is now a time capsule for one of the best to ever do it. It felt the same way as when we watched Black Panther after Chadwick passed away.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and it's you touched on it, legendary moment after legendary moment, and like obviously there's that whole. I want to half call it controversy, half call it a funny story about how James Earl Jones is not actually Darth Vader. Like it's you know, the
Right.
body of one man, the voice of another, and then when the mask comes off, it's neither of them.
Nope. Yeah.
Which I find very funny.
It's true.
Um,
Until it's Hayden
uh,
later, then at least there's two of the
yeah,
three.
right. 4 actors have played Darth Vader. Five. If you
Five.
want to count
Maybe even
Jack
more. We don't know.
right? We'll never know. But you know, that voice is just you're a member of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Like it's so iconic for so many ways that
Yep.
you talk about Rogue One. It's one of my favorite stories. Tim Geddes told a story about how he was watching a movie in theaters and his Apple Watch gave an alert like, "Hey, your heart rate's really fast and you're just sitting down right now. Is everything okay?"
Yeah.
And Tim talked about that, and I went on Twitter and I tried to make it a thing. Like that should be a testament to a moment in the movie. Is if your Apple Watch tells you, "Hey, your heart rate's too high for the lack of activity that you're going through right now." And
Right.
I came to be kind of obsessed with that a little bit. I wanted to get back into that, wearing my Apple Watch to movie, see if it can elicit that emotion from me at any point. But
Yeah.
I did do it with the very next movie I saw, which was the Rogue One re-release in theaters. And it was that moment, the Vader moment, when he comes through the first ship in A New Hope, and my watch set off, and that's just Vader, man, and that's all to Jimmy Jones. And I think that my favorite James Earl Jones role, like Darth Vader's obviously up there, Mufasa's obviously up there. I'm not saying anything that's not true. You think about Sandlot, man, like just like what he does for the movie Sandlot,
Yeah.
as
That's so
Mr.
true.
Myrtle, the neighbor, the owner of Zeus, like the oh George, like everything he does in that movie, like I get chills thinking about it. That is the number one thing I remember about Sandlot, is when Smalls goes into that house and they just sit down, they talk ball for a little bit,
Right.
and
Yeah.
his smile, just infectious, and the way they talk about Babe Ruth, the way he laughs about it. Oh man, you have no idea. Like just such a presence, and for so many people, think about it. Like so many people, you look at this entire list for James Earl Jones. They've seen Star Wars, they've seen Lion King, they've seen Sandlot. There's
Yeah.
only one of those where you see his face and you know
Yeah.
what he looks like, and like he's such a shining light in that. So, rest in peace, a good one. You said 90, 93.
He was
What a
93.
run! What a goddamn run for a legend. Rest in peace, James Earl Jones. Gone but not forgotten. We will be listening to your voice for the rest of our lives. I just want to let you know that if you're listening, James Earl Jones, big listener. I mean, he loved this podcast too. Something else we can say about it with confidence. It's a sad one, but it's part of it. Part of the journey is the end. You know what I mean? Simba. James Earl
It's true.
Jones, rest in peace.